This is Janet Macaluso and my dear friend and colleague, Cindy Reiss-Clark. And we, I think, booked this time to get together and share our journey of what we've been on for the last 4 years, for you to be able to experience a developmental approach. And that word is not used casually. That we've been using for the last 4 years. It's based on living systems worldview, as well as ancient wisdom that goes back beyond Socrates. So it also has indigenous ways of thinking, certainly modern science, and a solid track record of 60 years. This has been, I would say, it started 60 years ago, specifically in P&G. It's been copied and written about numerous times. But what we're going to do today is apply a systemic thinking frameworks, the very frameworks that Cindy and I have been using for years now. For you personally, especially if you're new to the Guild, you'll be able to think about, apply what we're talking about to your specific project, program, pursuit. Also, I'd like some of us to consider using these frameworks around our together experience in the CLG. So you have those two options. But I'm Janet Macaluso. I've been doing this type of approach now. I've been learning it for 6 years and applying it with Cindy for the last 4. The whole methodology of the developmental approach is based on a Harvard multidisciplinary study of 13 years, where they took the most incorrigible cases, like people who were in prison or had drug addiction or alcoholism. And they went through this methodology. I'm going to read it here. And as I say that, I'm then going to turn it over to Cindy, who has experienced it with herself and her organization. But I made it into something more memorable for me, calling it the ABCD effective change. The A for active means that the folks in the study, and what Cindy and I and her team do, is we bake the new patterns that we've been learning into our daily practice, 10 to 20% of our day, if possible. Then the B for blending is we're looking at whole being development, not just the brain, not just filling our toolkit up with more knowledge and more stuff. There was certainly a structural or functional process, but we also work on the state of being and also regenerating will. Will is motivation, and motivation vacillates very quickly or easily. So there's something about the C for cadence, that we come back together on a regular rhythm to regenerate our consciousness, our learning, to go back to the well on a regular cadence. Otherwise, the will deflates and collapses. And the research showed that the duration of true organizational change takes 3 to 7 years. Now, Cindy will attest that there's already been changes happening, but permanent, lasting organizational cultural change is an investment. And then finally, the E for environment, you might have heard that we're the average of the 5 closest people we hang out with in terms of finances, intellect, health condition. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I kind of like the idea. So are we hanging out with people who are also going through this on the journey of developing and regenerating ourselves? And the other thing around environment is having a change agent. In this case, it was me, who has been on the same path, but just a tiny bit ahead. That's how Alcoholics Anonymous was founded, or Weight Watchers, because then they're able to reframe and catch you when you maybe collapse, because they've been there themselves. So I just went through that very quickly to give a sense of the framework that actually is the foundation of how we work. But Cindy, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself and maybe share how this is played out.
Thank you, Janet. So I'm Cindy Reiss-Clark, and I certainly am still on my conscious leadership and regenerative journey. But as Janet said, we've been working together for 4 years specifically on this type of work. And my profession, I lead our commercial organization, which is our sales, marketing, customer service organization, product management at a company called West Pharmaceutical Services. And when we started this journey, it was right in the heart of COVID. And, the company that I work for, you probably know West, but have never even realized it. But we provide a lot of the containment for injectable drugs. So if you've ever had a vaccine, used a syringe, or ever had to have an infusion, West. So as we were embarking on this journey, we really forced ourselves to kind of think differently. And I had worked with Janet a year prior to introducing this to my team. But if I look at this framework, this is exactly the change journey that we started. And when I think about the intensity, we deliberately put forth, whether it was like through quarterly retreats where we would spend multiple days, either virtually, when, it started virtually, but then obviously as COVID started to kind of shift and we were able to be more, had direct engagement, we shifted that to more face-to-face. But it was around like the cadence, the intensity, the duration, and the focus. And, we were introduced to a lot of different elements, but always around like keeping the whole in mind, understanding the energy that we brought to our work, the energy we brought to our teams, because that was very important because there was just so much uncertainty. So how do we manage ourselves? How do we be a resource and guide and lead in the right way across a larger organization to be able to create and bring about the effect that we wanted to have? And we are still on this journey. We're 4 years, 3 years into it as an organization, and we are starting to see our efforts and our pursuits kind of come to fruition, which is fascinating. And it's really about a shift in a bigger organization. But we started with myself and the leadership team, and now, we're now sponsors to other parts of our organization, and we're the sponsors to our own teams further into the organization in this developmental process. And it's a lot about, it's Socratic questioning. It's understanding really on a much bigger scale, the source of our thinking, the source of our energy, as to what are we trying to achieve as a business, but really more so, really about what do we want to achieve on behalf of our customers and the patients we serve.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Great. And Cindy, keep bringing in your war stories all along the way as we share this. So thank you so much. And one of the first things that we do, I know at the Conscious Guild, we usually start with the meditation. A little difference is we do a wake up that actually, it creates an intentional field, and it helps us regenerate our focus, our attention, and our consciousness. So we're about to, right now, I'm going to introduce a wake up exercise. I will ask you all, if you have a sheet of paper, please bring that out. We're going to think on paper. at least for a few minutes anyway. And what we're going to do to start is I'm going to introduce this framework. It's an ancient framework. It's universal, really, that in any type of process or event in the world, you certainly see this, let's say, in movies, where there's some type of activating energy. And then there's also a restraint. By the way, we see this in politics, black and white, Republican, Democrat, back and forth. But also there's something an energy that can reconcile, that is above and beyond. It's not cutting the baby in the Bible sense of compromise. It's coming to something totally different. So what that is, and welcome, Deborah, she just joined now, the universal law of three, a little bit more information, and then you're going to apply it. But this activating force on the left-hand side, it initiates some type of action or change. It drives something into being, and it represents creativity, that creative impulse. Now, on the right-hand side, always when there's something activating, there's always a restraining force. It's not always bad necessarily, but it opposes or denies or diminishes. You know, it's like the boy meets girl, but then daddy says no. There you go with the movie. There's some restraint. So there's some inertia, something that is inhibiting it. I always thought when I first learned this framework, oh, you're like a buzzkill. This restraining force is like slowing me down. But over time, I see the value. The restraining force actually governs and it refines, it balances somehow. Let's say, like, here's my phone. Let's say someone wanted to create an iPhone, but then the restraining was it had to have these limitations, this size, these amount of chips, whatever. There's some type of governing guardrails. So that's the restraining energy. And if you don't have a reconciling, you just go back and forth. So the reconciling energy, it harmonizes around core issues. It integrates, but it also lifts up beyond current existence. So it creates a new state or a new result. Kind of joking, I say Yoda energy or the bumper sticker. What would Jesus do or what would Obama do? Sometimes that type of energy helps you think about the reconciling. And although this is an ancient framework, you can see this play out. The couple of business examples. If you all know Post-it notes, well, the activating force there was they were created, but the restraining was they weren't sticky enough. But then a whole new category reconciled that. The same thing with Airbnb as an example, where folks wanted a hotel, but they couldn't afford one, or there weren't enough. And then there was a reconciling force for that as well. So these energies play out all the time. Now, here's your application. But what I want you to think about is either have two sides of your book, if you have a book, left and right, or just put a page down the middle, a line down the middle. And the questions we're going to ask, put your responses on the left side and on the right-hand side, because our intention is to regenerate our consciousness and our thinking, is to also become aware on the right-hand side, make note of any judgments, any comparisons. Oh, I know this. She said tomato, I call it tomato. It's just like this. And what I'm asking you when you answer these questions is to regenerate your mind by listening for what's new. Break out from any ingrained routines and thinking patterns, and catch yourself when you go on autopilot, real time. This is what the very same exercises Cindy and her team have done numerous times. So here's the questions we're going to ask. When you consider the potential life-affirming effects on the world, either from your own personal project, program, your own work, especially for the new folks who don't know the CLG, choose that one. But you also might consider what are the potential life-affirming effects on the world from the CLG. Keep that in mind. And now use the law of three. What excites, energizes, and engages you? That's the activating energy. What challenges, opposes, questions, or refines or diminishes that energy? I'm going to give you time. I'm just reading them now. And then the third energy, the third force. What would harmonize or integrate or lift up and focus and clarify both energies to something above and beyond the two opposing? So I think for just keeping pace, let's keep the whole, we won't do a breakout as much as I love that. Let's just give a couple of moments, a few minutes of silent reflection. I'll be quiet. If you have questions, ask them now. Otherwise, go ahead and write for a couple of minutes. One of the differences I've learned from this methodology of working that's different from my 30 years, I've been a master trainer of facilitators, which meant that after groups would break out, I would say, oh, let's hear from you. What did you say? And they would go to the flip chart and read off the flip chart. Well, what I've learned is if you're reading off the flip chart and you're just regurgitating what you already know. So I'm not going to ask you to report out your answer. What I'm going to ask you is, what's the next learning from that? And what is shifting in you when you did this exercise? What was the effect that it had on you? Now I will stop and open it up. What has shifted, anyone?
I'll start, Janet. Is 10 seconds on what I was focusing on. Two friends who may need to go into assisted living. I found a facility, but they still have some renovations to finish. I want to make sure that my friends go there, they're going to have a good experience. So I saw the push-pull. What shifted in me was to tune back simply the energy that's going on there, rather than trying to think it through. And to feel, is this really a right direction? Do the energies, do they actually harmonize together? Or is this not a good fit? And so it was more of an energetic shifting rather than trying to think or even feel it through for me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I had an energetic shift too. It reminded me of, Arlene is familiar with this, the attempts at the university that we were a part of to have these micro-credential offerings to the public. And there was this push for us to develop all of these courses that we would, as another offering to the public other than credit-bearing courses. And so we developed, out of this enthusiasm, we started to develop all these courses, but there really was nobody taking them, in a sense. It was discouraging because the school was dying. Also, the school was dying like a lot of small colleges and universities. So there was this, so when I started creating the courses, like course I'm creating for the guild, I had that same sense. Is this going to be futile? That there's no way that we have our budgets or whatever it is we have to make this known to the public for people to take these courses, and then some new ideas came out of it from this third piece, and I could see a way for make this work, and so I'll be sharing this with William afterwards about some of the ideas that have come to me. In many ways, this is almost like the bottom of the U in theory, U theory, or theory U. Mm-hmm. This bottom place where something new arises out of it, mm-hmm. that has integrated, that somehow there is a seeing of the whole, and out of the seeing of the whole and then just going empty, something new arises out of it that harmonizes it and inspires it and makes it a possibility, and it comes to you like that. That's the gift of most of successful and really creative people. They have a practice that allows them to empty themselves after they've immersed themselves in it, and after they've pulled back to see their own seeing, and then go empty. And then somewhere out of the emptiness, out of this fecund emptiness, comes this beautiful resolution. And when it hits us, we know, yes, that's the direction we need to go. We may need to create prototypes or whatever to find out what we don't know. But there's something that knows, and we can also communicate it to others in a way that they get it too. There's something strange about, mysterious and sacred about this place.
I'm going to ask, just because the two, William and Rick, those examples, but I'm betting most everyone, whatever you thought about, when Cindy talks about paradigm, I want you to assess where your thing, whatever it was, is on the levels of paradigm. Because that's two of them, I've already done that for you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was just thinking about, I'm in Vegas right now, and it's its own world. And I'm thinking about the challenge of bringing love and spaciousness into work. And just the challenge of that is that the real world, like, we're on a train, man, and we can't slow down because, it's not productive, and it's stupid, and it's a waste of time, and we got shit to do. And and it's very seductive. And now I'm saying, well, love can be energetic. You can love energetically. Love and magnetism is more efficient than force, although force can be quicker. So really thinking about, what are those reconciling forces to kind of help pull people towards that and bringing that into work. I was thinking about the guild. What's the guild's role in the world? And and then one of the judgments that came in is, well, that's great if you've got a PhD and you've been a consultant for 30 years and you're super, and you live in San Francisco, blah, blah, blah. But what about normal people? And that just really kind of brought me to spiritual training. This isn't something that you need an advanced degree. You just need connection to source. And so what's the role of spiritual training, which is accessible to all? You know, if you're going to be one, I know the developmental guys love to talk about, red and, higher tiers. And so anyway, so that was kind of the shift in me. Maybe just a little bit of hope, but cracking the code and how to make love and spirituality attractive to the masses. As attractive as Vegas. How do you make that as attractive as Vegas?
I have a working premise that is we have to be in a state or a field of consciousness for consciousness to emerge and grow and bear fruit. And this has been a long thought thinking process of mine, is that going back to the change theory of cadence, the C, the cadence is important to regenerate my consciousness, because I can guarantee after this beautiful session that we have and I go away, I will collapse into automatic pilot. So it's this field of consciousness. We're conscious. This is my premise. But any final one more burning thought before we? Yes, Louis.
I can't resist. And even
I know
I'm
you
so glad I
couldn't.
waited. I'm so glad I waited because of what you just said. I want to answer your question by complimenting you. So trust that I'm doing my own work first. And that is when I had my first one-on-one with you, and when you started this process, I found myself getting totally defensive because of the way I was raised and educated about being told, here's the way to do this and this and this, and start this process and this. So I knew how to just breathe. And just like in our first one-on-one, something's going to come out of this. And just that exercise opened me up to something I had never so simply felt. And then when you say, oh, I had to go through a thinking process to do this, and then A, B, C, I go, what? However, you got me. You got me just with that exercise so wonderfully that I have huge respect for how you think and how you get to the being so well with your exercise. I'm in fact going to use it 1 week from today in my belonging session, either with you or without you, as you wish, because it's a wonderful exercise, as wonderful as anything I've used in decades. Thank you.
You're welcome. And a note of caution. There's thousands of these frameworks, and given my experience, and yours is similar, I fell in love with them and then thought, I'm going to go do it. And they fall flat because there's an energetic presence that needs to be with that. Otherwise, it's all, if you remember will, being, and function, it's all functional. And there's enough function. I don't think the Guild needs to offer more functional skills. So that's my note of caution. With that, moving on, keep your thinking, your project or the CLG in mind. We're going to talk about paradigms. And so they're this invisible force through which I'm seeing the world. It started in sciences or certain domains, but if you think about how we educate, or how the field of medicine, there's traditional medicine and all different types of medicine, or how we manage and lead or parent our children. So all of these are paradigms, but what happens is we only see the elephant in this case through our own paradigm. And then we become paradigm blind. Like the rhino, we see the world and we don't realize we're seeing it through our own lens. My question to you is, are we deliberate about the source of the paradigm that is sourcing how we lead, design, manage, coach? Oh, so keep that in mind. And that's what we're going to be talking about, because you might say, oh, well, we're not in the industrial age anymore with time in motion, I Love Lucy, in the Candy Factory, all of that. We're not in this industrial world, but maybe it's just old wine in new bottles, where we're carbon copying generic offerings to distinct beings. Imagine your beloved child. Would you want your child to be slotted into a bell curve or a box? But that's what happens. So those are just a couple of examples, because I'm seeing the world through the paradigms and saying we are stuck in a paradigm that we're so used to, we don't see it anymore, but it's there. And so what we're going to do is these ancient frameworks can become very esoteric. So we always ask that you use a real specific concrete example. Don't make it theoretical. And I'm asking you to self-assess a real project, program, pursuit, could be the one you just chose, or the CLG. It could be current or past. It could be successful or room to grow. It doesn't matter. But just choose. It could be the same one you just chose, but something real. And I'm going to turn it over to Cindy, who knows this well. And I think she was seeing it this morning play out in one level.
It's
So
in real life.
okay, here we go then, Cindy.
Here we go. So as Janet said, just keep in mind, because I want to premise this by saying that just because it's on an order of things doesn't mean it's bad, but it's about, are we conscious of it? Because it's very easy to live life on autopilot. And when you're thinking about just like, I'm just going to check the box and I just need to do certain things without kind of taking a step back and saying, well, what context, or how am I thinking about this, or how am I viewing it? You know, that's where I think the consciousness comes up. So if we're conscious about what our view of the world is, these things can be nested and they're not bad. But if this is kind of our natural mode of operating, it is about creating that awareness. And, you know, I can speak for myself on this journey is, once I saw these paradigms, there was an awakening. There's an awareness now that I can't unsee. And so hopefully this has the same, awakening in all of us during this session. But at the kind of the lowest level of paradigm is extract value. And when you think about that value return, it is competing or dominating human or non-human assets for our benefits. And I look at this in a couple of ways. When the team first started our journey with Janet, you know, there was a lot of discussion around, you know, this is my lane, right? I'm going to stay in my lane. I don't want to be able to, product management should do this or sales should do that. Or maybe Craig, even some of the comments that you just provided in your thoughts that you shared. You know, when you kind of look at the world as extract value, you know, this is where we're not really necessarily thinking about the effect that we're having on the choices that we make, because we're thinking about what is it doing for me right now? And what can those effects be? It could be disengagement of teams. It can be, exploitation. So, you know, we can think we're doing really good things, and we think we can be, growing a business. And because we are, growing a business and thinking we're creating and capturing value, the effect may be something like this in this picture, right? At the same time, you can now move to the second level of paradigm to say, okay, now I move from just extraction without thinking about the effect of it to what we call a rest disorder. And, you know, we now understand kind of the damage that we're causing, but we're not actually maybe getting to the root of its core. We are still reactive and just kind of putting a Band-Aid on something. So when I think about this arrest disorder, you know, going from, hey guys, you need to stay in your lane. If what this person could just do this, that would benefit me, to where now you may want to go into an organization, and instead of really, doing the discovery work to the root of a cause or the root of what we're trying to do, you may put a team on it, a task team or a tiger team, or I'm going to put a cobra team. And, you know, basically it's still fairly reactive. You're now working as a team, but we're not getting to kind of the root to be able to truly think about it in a different way. We're just kind of plugging that hole. So that's kind of the, I can tell you by experience, when we were trying to solve or engage and interact with clients, sometimes it was just, we just got to put out this fire because we're too busy, right? It's almost like you're too busy, and people can be very busy, but are you really driving where you want to go? So it's kind of keeping that in the forefront. At the next,
what was the line I heard numerous times? Like,
we love a good crisis.
We love a good crisis.
We love a good crisis to bring us together, right? Like we love a good urgent thing that brings the teams together, because that became the purpose, is the fire we're putting out versus the direction that we're going as an organization, or what are we trying to achieve on behalf of our clients. It was more, our purpose was to go from one burning issue to the next burning issue, right? And that's how we were coming together.
I heard stories how, if you don't have some higher purpose that you're all swimming in the same direction to, it's like your team, regardless of the customer, maybe if this isn't your desired customer, everyone's giving them like white glove reactive results because they're arresting the disorder. It's how do we stop it, plug the hole. So I saw it, and you must see it. I think you saw it this morning too, didn't you?
Yeah, it's true. So on our third level is do good. And in this case, we are really looking at we are looking at kind of more around culturally idealized versions of what is perceived as good. And I think most of us have heard of gurus or benchmarks, right? I can tell you, like, if there was a time that if you didn't mention Gartner or McKinsey or one of the other big consulting firms, it wasn't kind of perceived as best practice or good. And I think that, you know, from a personal perspective, I think we all have in our own mind the idolization of what is good. You may compare yourself, or you know, depending upon the culture you're in, you may have a different perception of what is good, because it's subjective. And I can give you an example of you know, one of my leaders, like how he conducted meetings, right? It was very much in a do good, where, you know, they were discussing the right things. But the way that they were conducting the discussions was really more of like making everybody feel good versus really addressing maybe a conflict or something that would really elevate the dialogue in a different way. So it's not to say that it's, you know, this isn't bad. There's a lot of good things that can come from benchmarking. There's a lot of good things that you can kind of look at to say, you know, where am I on the maturity of things, or where am I on my journey? But if that's the only place you stay, it goes back to the will and being. Am I really raising the energy? Am I raising the bar for myself, or am I being self-directed to kind of go into another paradigm? And if you go to the next slide, Janet, this can kind of just illustrate, it's the gold standards, the ideals and gold standards. And you've got to look at, you know, you look at best practices, you look at a lot of things, but again, it's still fairly subjective. And who sets the gold standard, right? Is it self-directed? Is it, are we now just more in we don't want to go against the flow, right? Because I may identify myself in certain areas, but not others, or others may put me in a box, like a 9 box or a bell curve. And is that where you want to stay or be, right? In terms of your being. So then if we go to the last, did somebody have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I spent close to 30 years working. The source of my work was the do-good paradigm. Emotional intelligence, listen, don't interrupt, psychological safety, warm and fuzzy, noogies on the head, team building, golf, you know, all of these things. Now, they're not bad, but I wrote an article called Why Well-Intended Coaches, Leaders, and Consultants Aim Too Low and Reach It.
Low goals.
That's all they reach for is do good, which I did. I'm like a converted smoker, okay, that now doesn't want anyone to smoke because I can't unsee. If we aim too low and reach it, what happens? Go ahead, Cindy.
And then the other one is really, how do you rise to that evolve inherent potential, where you really are seeking a unique essence to essence approach, where you recognize that, you know, what you're working towards has a different level of potential. And it is the work that we need to do. And I can say, you know, just to echo Janet, you know, I too was leading from more of probably a do good or an arrest disorder. I was creating urgency within my team. And if you think about the energy levels, like you know, what is the energy that you associate even with the tears? You know, when you create as a leader, or when you're trying to impact the world in a different way, the energy that you're creating, whether it's reactive or purposeful, or, you know, vital or creative, that matters, because then it comes back to kind of what is sourcing the energy, what's sourcing your will, your motivation, your being state. And, you know, had we not gone through this work, and we had not gone through these frameworks, you know, are we at evolve inherent potential in every meeting, at every gathering? I'm going to say no, we're not. But when we think about our customers and what do we want to bring forward in the world as a team, that is what we're striving for. And so how we use these levels of paradigms, if you go to the next slide, is we ask ourselves, you know, are we coming from a space of existence, or are we really driving to our potential? Are we reacting to something, or are we being proactive in how we're thinking, how we're managing our being and our will to drive where we want to go and what we want to bring about? And we use this in how we think about innovation. We use this in how we prepare and have discussions with our customers, because what are they trying to achieve when they bring a new medicine to the world? What role do we play in that? And it just gets us thinking very differently on behalf of others. I use it even within my family. I'll sit back and say, okay, how did I come across there? What level did I start from? And I just want to state that these aren't bad. I think what I've learned and what I think through a lot is it's about the consciousness. Because even at the lowest extract value, people wouldn't be in business. They've got to, you know, if you are working for a for-profit company, like, you know, you've got to extract some value or you wouldn't be in business, right? But it's about being conscious about what you are doing in the different levels. And if you're staying, or if your mode of operating is really only in one, like, what do you need to do in order to reconcile to a different level? And that's, to me, is what this brings in leadership and even how I engage differently with my teams.
Yeah.
Bill, I see your hand up.
Yeah.
So it would be helpful to me, excuse me, to have a better delineation between involve, inherent potential, and do good. I'm struggling to see where the demarcation line actions are.
So one way of thinking, the do good, I believe, sources diversity and inclusion, affirmative action, sustainability. And what happens often, Bill, is that it becomes kind of like a source of colonialism. It's like, I'm the one who's telling you what it should look like. As an example, and now there's a lot of do good. There's a lot of good in do good. It's above the line. So don't get me wrong. I'm trying to give you the different, the question you're asking is exactly the skill that we build, is that create discernment on the subtle nuances so that each team, a person knows. So it's really about, an example, when I first started with Cindy, they used to talk about their leadership team, her group of vice presidents. That's what they talked about. Then they moved the conversation up to start talking about West as a multi-thousand person organization. It was the whole company as a whole. Living Systems looks at the whole. Then over time, I've heard Cindy and others talk about the medical device industry. They're not following the best practices of what's out there. They want to disrupt the industry to make it more accessible and affordable. And that is like totally different kind of blue sky thinking that is needed, because they love their people and know their people so well. And how can they not just sell their product, this medical device, but where does their offering fit into their customer, B2B, their customer's value adding process, so that they're increasing the ableness of their customer, not just saying, you asked for this order, here it is, on time, at the price you asked. We've increased your ableness. Cindy, any thoughts on that?
No, I would just say that, Bill, from that nuance of do good, I do think it's, I can give an example, and I'll use sustainability as an example because I think it is a hot topic for a lot of people. And we can use sustainability and go through the different layers. But when I think of do good, you can, the difference in my mind is we recycle, we want to really eliminate waste in our manufacturing. To shift it from do good to evolve inherent potential, like do good is like, we want to be recognized as one of the top 20 businesses on a standard, and we have different standards, but can we do more, right? So there's, Europe is wanting certain things by 2030, others are wanting certain things by 2030. And we're looking at that as like, some people can greenwash, right? You buy green credits, you can tap into an energy. Well, that's not bad, right? But I think the difference is, if you really move to evolve inherent potential, the conversations we're having now are, how do we truly build products and use packaging that everything can be reusable or reusable, recyclable? What are we doing in terms of what energy we're using, not buying into it, but like really walking the walk of, is everything, do we have a goal to use renewable energy in all of our factories? So that way we're not just looking at it from a carbon neutral, but truly thinking about it in a different way that makes a real true impact on the environment. That would be maybe a nuance that how we think about the difference, because it's not bad, right? Do good isn't bad. I think, but it's like, there's probably another order that if you really challenge yourself, you could strive towards. And I think we all have more potential than what we think it's like we all have more potential in us than what we probably give ourselves credit for at first glance.
Thank you. William.
Yeah, there's a conversation I think that builds upon what we were talking about here from conscious capitalism and others about having a purpose-driven company, which to me is defined by having a purpose bigger than what you can do yourself, or bigger than what you can achieve yourself as a company. Mm-hmm. For example, Patagonia says, our purpose as a company is to save the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's not something you're going to achieve by yourself. And I found a quote from Mary Barra, the CEO and chairman of GM, that said, our purpose as a company is zero emissions to save the planet's health, zero crashes to save lives, and zero congestion so people can have time back. Now, she's not going to achieve that with GM, but if that's what you're striving for, so where does that fit here? Is that even beyond inherent potential? Or is that part of what inherent potential is referring to?
Well,
because it's beyond self-interest is what the real sense is there. It's beyond your self-interest that you can achieve as a company.
I do believe it is, but probably I don't want to give like a quick and dirty answer just to reply to you. It needs more thought. It's certainly moving upwards, though.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I mentioned to Cindy is like, okay, so you use rubber in your manufacturing. And so are you regenerating the rubber farms? And is Earth a stakeholder in your organization? Or are you just extracting the value from the rubber plants and then thank you very much, don't let the door hit you in the ass, as an example? So I can be conscious, but I'm also a street kid. Tom,
Gotcha.
what's up?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I get it, the distinction between do good and evolve inherent potential from a business practices and from a materials perspective, but can you speak to it in terms of the leadership qualities? Leadership qualities and as a human being and human relations, human interactions?
So I can start. From a do good, I think that naturally most leaders are here, and I can speak from experience in terms of, if you look at it from self-directed, like everybody can have good intentions, and you could still tell somebody what to do versus ask a lot more questions to really get to the source of how are they thinking about it, what is their view, really consider them in the outcome or in the discussion versus giving an answer, right? So when I think of leadership and even my own growth in leadership, there's always questions that you ask, but it's really kind of thinking about, can you elevate the perspective? Can you be a resource for somebody to be self-directed, that you can create a different being state, a different motivation and will, that they would want to take a different initiative, or that they would want to do something on their own because they thought it through in a completely different way from a different perspective. And to me, it goes back to what Janet was talking about. It's will, being, and function. But I think when I look at do good versus the evolve inherent potential, you're keeping all three of those in mind, in that inherent potential. It is about the being state, it's about the will as well as function. And it's really looking at kind of what effect do you want to have, not just the outcome.
Yeah.
If that made sense, Tom.
Yeah, thank you for that.
So what we're really talking about is when Einstein said, we can't solve the problems with the old way of thinking, we need to think anew. So what I'd like you to do is to think about a different direction using this on your work that you have been thinking about. So if you go and assess your project, your program, and it could be a learning leadership program, by the way, or the Conscious Leadership Guild, and the topics we talk about, the work we do. What's the dominant paradigm that is sourcing the design or the process, the activities, the focus? And are we consciously choosing that source paradigm? How do we know? And then when you think of that, what is activating in you, or restraining, or perhaps reconciling? Now, I'll tell you, in terms of leadership development and education, I would often give all the best practices, and this is what you're supposed to say and do. And it was an expert model. This developmental that is different from, I think it was Craig who talked about color. This is far different from that. Not far different. They have the same word, developmental. But what we're focusing on is increasing the ableness of the people we're working with, so that they can think differently. Their state of being is more imperturbable. And their will. I remember there's this wonderful teddy bear on Cindy's team. Everyone loves him. and how he's changed now, where he goes, no more Mr. Nice Guy. Well, the guy is just exudes Mr. Nice Guy. That's not changing. But he has such a higher purpose now that he's not going to let people off the hook, or he's not going to stop the conversation when it gets uncomfortable, because he's working on behalf of evolving the patients, the end users, and building their capacity, and they deserve more. And when he holds that in mind, that level of potential, next stage potential, then he goes from do good, and he has said that. That's an example. So why don't you just, maybe as we're getting close, spend a few minutes here, maybe just thinking and answering those questions. And if we do have time, I'd like to talk about the levels of thought and the effect. That also somehow, I think maybe Tom was the one, but somehow that came up for me. So I'm going to ask you to just answer those quietly. Thanks. I say, let's have a conversation, because for this is only, the first conversation we've had on this, and it takes time. But just wanted to know what's maybe exciting you or shifting in you. Maybe what do you find of value so far?
I think I love the presentation, but the most impressive thing is that there's a New York Stock Exchange traded company with over 5,000 employees that is actually practicing this. That's, to me, I wouldn't have bet $1 on that. So, Cindy, congrats.
Comes from leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but most pharmaceutical companies are led by Wall Street.
Yeah.
So,
Well, right, it's the it's the constant restraint and activating that we're looking at, obviously, because like that is still a stakeholder. But the conversations we're having is, if all companies, if all they are looking at is focused on the value of it and how do you continue growth? Well, if you grow and grow and grow and grow, at what cost, and what are the repercussions of that and the effects? So I think, Bill, you and I have had this conversation before. How do you redefine success in companies? On what time horizon? Because if it's it's earnings seasons, right? We just came out of earnings last week, and we're in a bit of a rest disorder right now around like the sense of urgency in the back half of the year. And it's not to say that we're always at the top, right? I mean, but there's a cognition that it's where we are, and how do we actually build capability, and what role do we play as leaders for all of our 10,000 employees versus a few,
no, it's refreshing. It's great. Some others on this call that know more about healthcare than I do sort of led me to not expect great things from the healthcare sector. So it's nice to have this shining example of the striving, because that's all you can do, right? We all live in a world of constraints. I mean, you can't be a company of your size and not be publicly traded. I suppose you could be, but so yeah.
So I'm going to go to William next. I just wanted to say some things that I kind of forgot about was I see do good as a portal to the next one. So it's not saying you don't need it. Let's not aim there and reach it, because there's another level. And The other thing that I think I forgot to talk about was with evolve potential, we're always talking about the whole system, not my piecemeal department or my fragmented project. It's the whole, and the system includes the customer and even the end users. Always, we're always looking, who are we forgetting? So I wanted to add that. William.
Yeah, two insights I have here. One is if I look at this as like a nested system where extract value is the kind of least expanded consciousness, expand it to arrest disorder, expand it more to do good, expand it more to evolve potential. That means you can be operating from evolving potential and be consciously doing good, arresting disorder, and extracting value at the same time, but you're holding it in a larger space.
Yes.
It's kind of like you can hold non-duality, and duality is a small piece of what the non-duality can hold. The other thing I can see here is that the activating, restraining, reconciling, I had a chuckle about choosing a source paradigm, and I capitalized the word S. Choosing a source paradigm. And I see that the reconciling is the source, capital S source.
Yes.
It's like when we as personalities feel like we're activating and something's restraining us, that's at a personality level. But energetically, as that moves up to the source to guide us, it starts harmonizing things automatically. So I saw those two pieces kind of blending into these other conversations we've had in the guild. So thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Myron and then Lewis. Myron, we going to see your pretty face or just the lake?
Well, maybe not a pretty face, but maybe just a face. So a brilliant insight that came through for me in this session is that in every dominant paradigm, there is always activating and restraining. Statistical process control tells me that there's always variation. And that's normal. That's typical. And to consider the activating and constraining as something special really distracts from the inherent the inherent potential, which is completely different than either one of those or both of them. It is its own realm, but then when it's engaged, then it brings in whatever else is going on. And so that's really fascinating for me. And then in the context of the guild, I didn't want to say this, but I'm going to say this. What is the dominant paradigm? And what's happening in that dominant paradigm? And what is a way with being with inherent potential? But even calling it inherent potential, like consciousness, it's so big, it's so broad that it's actually nothing. Inherent potential is the same way. It's so big, it's like, world peace, eliminating hunger. It's so big that I can think about it and feel good. And yet, that's really about me feeling good. What is it that I can do right now? And that really just this insight really reinforces how important it is for me to be present to what's actual and aware in terms of the wholeness, not just my own parochial view, but the many views that make up the whole. So thank you.
Yeah. And the point on that is these frameworks I've been asked numerous times to dumb them down because their words, the semantics are unusual, and can't you make it easier? And so what we always ask is apply these sacred frameworks to specific concrete work. And so it's not just like, oh, inherent potential of the universe. No, what's the inherent potential of this medical device that we're talking about right now? It's always concrete. And I'll stop there. Thank you. Craig.
So this has been a really useful session, so thank you. And I'm also going to research West's stock later. But yeah, I'm really thinking about dominant paradigm. It's been on my mind because I'm working with another organization that I think of as a really conscious, indigenous, women-led organization, and I've been surprised by what I perceive as kind of fallback onto kind of dominant male, get shit done, throw some systems thinking methodology at it, and let's solve climate change or etc. Right? A lot of that do-good stuff, and actually, it's funny. I did what William said without even realizing I was doing it. How I read, are we choosing a source paradigm? I really read that as, are we choosing a paradigm grounded in source? And in the case of this organization, I think they really think they are. But I'm wondering if there's just stories about what that looks like, about what right or conscious ways of doing things look like. And are those actually the constraints? And so what I'm curious about is the quality of energy that we bring. And what does that do to inherent potential? Because what I think I'm seeing is people who actually really have a sincere practice, like real, and have connection to source. Really have it, and then they default back to these ways of getting things done that we've always done. And so what I'm curious about is how does what I wrote down was, how does the quality of our energy impact outcomes, and how do we really pay attention to that? And then at the same time, how do we meet others whose energy is different or in opposition to our own? And how do we navigate that without falling back on force, or I'm going to convince you that the way of sacred reciprocity with the earth is the right way. I'm going to pitch that, or I'm going to force you to adopt that. And so that's what I'm really curious about. And what is a way of being with inherent potential, Myron? I thought is a really interesting question. So those are the things rattling around in my head as I leave this.
Today's crises invite us or call us to a higher level of being, thinking, and doing. And for me, these frameworks help us see the subtle nuances, discernment, and distinction. We have this one we've shared around paradigms. We have another one on levels of energy, which is from vital energy, life or death, I'm going to get a pink slip or something, or automatic or sensitive, like do good, or evolve or conscious energy. We work with Cindy's teams, know these.
Yes.
So they know, what level am I coming from right now? It has to be kind of embodied, this type of work. And we also have these for her looking at her product offerings. And how do you make yourself non-displaceable in the marketplace? Or are you just offering a one product or something? So she looks at her suite of products. through the lens of non-displaceability. These are all levels of thinking, but it starts with yourself before you'd go to that that thinking. Lewis, go ahead. And then I realize we're running out of time.
Yeah, Janet, I experienced this process and your facilitation of this process so enlightening that I really would like to experience two different full sessions that you facilitate on this. One, for those of us who are just trying to get better inside the guild with ourselves, developing our own consciousness more fully and in our circles. And I'd like to have another session for those of us, and I'm in each, who would like to use it to figure out how we as a guild, along with what everything William's suggesting and others, how we as a guild can offer things to the outside. The whole process I find so wonderful. I really would like to have a full session led by you to use it for each of those.
Well, I'm going to bear with me. I might go a few minutes over, but as I thank you, you've given a great segue. I will offer this. This is my colleague, Bill Reed. Bill Reed was like on the certifying board of LEED buildings, like green buildings. And if you see he wrote about it and used this, and then someone took his framework and edited it. He told me he didn't like it. But if you see, there's conventional, green, sustainable, restorative, regenerative. And in this piece of work, they have the SDGs in the middle, do good. But what we're looking at, how do we get the whole system, the living systems? You will get this deck, by the way. So we'll make sure because I'm going very quickly. But that was next. So I wanted to show you, we're trying to move away from degenerative all the way to truly regenerative. And what does that mean? So very quickly, if you think about business, and we're often talking about, as leaders, what are the results and the outcomes? And if we kind of re-engineer that, we see that those came from actions or inactions. I mentioned Cindy's teddy bear employee. He was a leader. He was doing inaction because he wanted to love his people so much. That creates a result. And those actions or inactions are sourced from our thinking, or what David Bohm would call is thoughting. He would question us, are you really thinking or just copying your thoughts? I met a woman recently, and she doesn't know this work at all. She's in finance, and she goes, these leaders, they always want to hire. Did you do it before in another company? Oh, good. Come here and do it. I've done Workday change management in 4 different companies. I just changed the PowerPoint slide. Copy pasting. That's an example of thoughting. It's off the shelf. It's not looking at who are those beloveds and where are they aspiring to grow. How do I help their ableness? That requires this discernment and thinking that they deserve. It's not thoughting. And then from the thoughting, it's really thinking about, well, what are the subjects we pay attention to at the guild or at work? Are we over attending or under attending? And is it by choice or default? It just happens because that's how we always did it. That's how my boss did it. So I'm doing it the same way. And then there's the how. And what we're saying is that the power is upstream so that we can create the effects in the world. As an example, Cindy and I just had a conversation a while ago when you're thinking about Ozempic and these drugs that they're weight loss drugs. Well, that's making a lot of results in terms of money.
But
Well, what are the effects on the system? On young girls or whoever, do we think about that or we stop here? And what we're really talking about, this evolved capacity or inherent potential, it's about the implicate order that David Bohm talked about. Something out there in the source that we want to create together with the source. It's not dealing with existence, because we know how to get stuff done real good. So finally, and this is Lewis teed this up, is how do we evolve our potential? Not on our state of being, but on our becoming. Last time I talked, I said it's not cushy, it's not the flow. Becoming is not the Zen zone. So it would require a cadence of regular meetings and focusing on that. So I guess that was the invitation. If there is an appetite for more of this thinking, that is something that Cindy and I are willing to offer the guild. So seeing some thumbs up, thank you, Bill. But if you'd like that, that's something because if we just do this once and done, we're not walking our talk. So reactions on that as I know we go over, but just final thoughts and then we'll say goodbye. Because that's it.
Yeah, I'm excited by it. I think the fact that you're blending so effectively the theory with the practical application that Cindy and you experience this has been great, and I don't feel like we've reached the bottom of the well.
Greg, did you have something to say?
I just wanted to say thank you for this, and I mean, I'd love to hear. I know we're over time, but I'd love to hear from Cindy about how, kind of through this process and through this kind of way of working, what it has, what shifts it's maybe created in your own way of being in your own relationship with work. I don't know. I'm curious about that. Just kind of personally, what it's how it's impacted you.
Yeah, I mean, I think like many, I came to a point of I was having to reconcile in my own mind, like, what is the effect I want? Like, what do I want to bring about in the world? And, I've been successful in many companies, but I would say one thing that I kept kind of coming up against was, the change that I wanted to make, whether it was in healthcare or in communities. There was something that was self-directed that I had to address within myself regarding kind of whether it was my mode of operating, or was I reactive? Was I purposeful? And so, I brought that into the teams I led. I brought that into the organizations that I was a part of. And I think what came forward to me was a lot of different things were coming at everyone at the same time. And it made me take a step back and say, hey, how do you actually lead and manage through uncertainty? And I don't have something from my past that I can thought or recycle or bring forward to meet this new challenge or to do these things. Like, I've got to I've got to be the phoenix that comes out of the fire. And how do you do that? I don't know. And I knew that, you know, if I was feeling that way, you know, it was stirring emotions and energy in me that I wasn't familiar with. And I think this work using the frameworks, kind of just level setting on not just kind of how you think about it, but also like the energy. You spoke about it beautifully, Craig. I can feel it. Like I can feel myself be in vital energy. And I can now say things like, why am I reacting to that? I can kind of feel it in my throat, if you will. And it's more about like, if I can't manage myself, how am I going to help others? Right. And so that is what it has brought to me. And that awakening, I wanted to share that with my teams. I wanted to share it more broadly because I do believe that there is a power in a community. And if we are driving in a way that you can really, truly create the change you want to create in the world, but you can't do it alone. I think, Bill, you made that comment. In so many ways, it is about like, how do you integrate and how do you engage to truly make that type of change? And I had the opportunity to be I'm an officer of a company. And if I can't do it there, where am I going to do it? Because like there comes from, you know, certain levels, but are we all 100% there? We're all on our journey. But the conversations we're having and what we are thinking about today is very different than what it was 4 years ago. And that to me has been that journey. That's the reason, you know, working with Janet, joining the guild, because I do believe that there's more that we can do if we really want to truly change a bigger system, whether it's the financial sector, Bill, or what is the definition of success? These aren't small things. To your point, Myron, these could be very big and they can be very nebulous. So how do you really focus on, you know, how do you break it down to something that you could really affect change to? Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm doing with the company is I truly want to develop my teams. And I don't want them to just, I don't want to develop them to just extract value. I want them to come to work because I truly believe people want to contribute to something big, right? And that's what you want to, how do you tap into that? How do I create that environment that, you know, you're self-directed and you take an agency and you take an initiative because you really want to drive something and you've got that conviction. And to me, that is truly the essence of conscious leadership. So that's the journey. I'm still on it. You know, I'm still a conscious leader in progress because you know what? I collapse and I collapse and I get into get shit done mode too. But it's like, you know, I now have a team that say, well, what order is this? Or what level are we working at here? And, you know, it kind of puts it into perspective.
So. Or how do we reconcile this?
How do we reconcile? Like we bring frameworks and we try not to be automatic but there's more frameworks and we'll bring them out. Like, how do we approach this? Well, let's look at it from the law of three. We use the frameworks now in a much bigger group to kind of think through things, or how do you approach things? It's just it's a change in our approach and how we work together and how we think. So.
And even when you do, there are times when you need to arrest the disorder. There is some urgency with the customer. Yet before it was just get stuff done, reactive, where now you know that there is a higher state looking at the whole thing, building ableness. We need to dip down, get this done, but we go back to this kind of base camp higher and more frequently.
Right.
And the final thing is these frameworks they help to order, in this case, what we're looking on the right.
Yeah.
It helps us order complexity and then organize complexity. So the other one we showed, the reconciling, that's called the law of three, that helps us order or organize. So there's different ones we use, helping the whole team build their own capability as they're building the capability of their system. With that, I think we should probably say thank you very much. You can see we really love this, and we're glad you're interested. So we'll keep you posted and talk to Jessica and get on the C for cadence so we can continue these discussions. Thank you very much.